Paris and Nicole head for the Lone Star State. Remember the Alamo in The Simple Life, 7:35. First up news.
Mugabe's bulldozers kill at least 3, including a child, amid a new assault on the dwellings of 50,000 Zimbabweans. Live from Africa, live from Uganda in the build-up to the G8 summit at Gleneagles. Good evening from Kampala. Africa has been served up a grim overture to next week's Africa deliberations, with well over 1/3 people bulldozed from their homes. Kofi Annan's special envoy on the ground in Harare, Robert Mugabe, has stepped up his clearances with fatal results. Tonight, the latest from Zimbabwe, and we talk with President Mbeki's brother about why South Africa is doing so little. Here in Uganda tonight, AIDS in the country that has more successfully reduced the numbers than anywhere on this continent. We're at an evangelical rally, part of a new AIDS movement here that, in preaching total abstinence from sex, is threatening the condom-based program that has saved Uganda thus far. Tonight, are Uganda's AIDS wards in danger of seeing a new upsurge in the disease? And London calling Africa, the musicians Bob Geldof forgot to invite to tomorrow's Live 8 concerts.
And the other headlines from London tonight: 3 gangsters are jailed for life for slaughtering an entire family in order to steal their business and use it to import drugs. As the discredited Professor Sir Roy Meadow defends himself over cot death evidence, Britain's leading medical journal says he's done nothing wrong. And business as usual as the men's and women's top seeds power their way to the Wimbledon singles finals.
Fernandi was just 5 years old as the bulldozers began demolishing his home. He fled but fell on the road and was crushed by an oncoming truck. Fernandi was one of 3 people who died yesterday when Robert Mugabe's forces embarked on the next stage of Operation Clean Up the Dirt. Among the dead, a pregnant woman reportedly beaten to death by police. The United Nations now says that more than 300,000 people are homeless. These latest demolitions happened whilst a UN envoy toured the country to assess the damage for herself. We have the disturbing account of the destruction in the settlement of Porta Fama, southwest of Harare. Our international editor Lindsay Hilson has this report.
A community demolished, a life destroyed. When the Zimbabwe authorities sent the bulldozers into Porta Farm, south of Harare, yesterday, they devastated more than buildings.
The caterpillars were demolishing the house, and my son ran onto the road. A truck ran him over and he died on the spot. His brains were splattered on the ground. We had to pick up his brains. Because I'm his father, I had to get sand to cover the blood.
Fernandi was 5 years old. The family say now they've been made homeless and destitute. They don't even know where to bury him or hold a funeral.
I blame the government because if they were not demolishing our houses, then my son would not have died.
The destruction was relentless and spared nothing and no one who happened to be in the way. This family sits with the body of their mother in the ruins of their home. She was too sick to run when the bulldozers came. Her daughter watched, helpless.
She was lying in the room and they came yesterday and they hit the wall fell to her and she was sick, she can't run away.
A pregnant woman was allegedly beaten by the police.
A woman died. She was getting into a car when they started beating her. She was pregnant. She fell over and died. Are they saying poor people must die? They might as well just shoot us all.
Porta Farm had been a thriving community. Ironically, President Mugabe's government brought the people here from Harare in 1992. so they wouldn't clutter up the capital during the Queen's visit for the Commonwealth Conference. After dark, the UN Secretary-General's envoy Anna Tibaijuka arrived, fresh from a meeting with government ministers. She's said to be deeply concerned that the demolitions are continuing even during her visit.
Why is it that these people are always torturing us? 15 years of facing horror. This is very unbearable.
They handed her a baby whose mother had fled.
She's hungry. Give her something to eat. Give her something to eat. She's very
I'm not the mother, and there's nothing to give the child.
She was overwhelmed. Ms. Tibaijuka was on Tony Blair's Africa Commission. In Zimbabwe, she's witnessing suffering caused not by terms of trade, debt or lack of aid, but by a government wreaking destruction on its own people.
Lindsay Hilsum reporting. Well, earlier I spoke to Maletsi Mbeki, brother of South African President Thabo Mbeki and Deputy Chairman of the South African Institute of International Affairs. I asked him why South Africa appeared to be doing nothing for the people of neighbouring Zimbabwe.
Many people in South Africa, including myself, but especially the trade unions, are very supportive of the people in Zimbabwe. So it's not correct to say the people in South Africa are doing nothing about Zimbabwe. There's huge support for the population in Zimbabwe that's being victimized by Mugabe's regime.
But forgive me, supportive, at what point does supportive draw a line in the sand and say we must take some action here?
Well, I don't think South Africa or any other country is going to take action and invade Zimbabwe to stop the Mugabe regime doing what it's doing to its population. That I don't think is going to happen.
No, I mean, obviously, I don't think people are asking for an invasion, but I mean, for example, strong condemnation, verbal condemnation, and conceivably something economic. After all, the economic costs to you are very terrible. I gather that you lose, if anything, like 4% GDP out of this instability?
Well, we lose a lot. We have over 2 million Zimbabweans who are, most of them illegally, in South Africa. But in terms of United Nations obligations, you can't just impose sanctions on a neighboring country. First, nobody in Zimbabwe has actually asked South Africa to impose sanctions. The Movement for Democratic Change has never asked South Africa to impose sanctions against Zimbabwe. So this is a question that many people keep saying, when are you going to impose sanctions? But nobody in Zimbabwe has asked for sanctions to be imposed against Zimbabwe.
But what perplexes people, I think particularly people in the north, is that, I mean, if this was going on in France, we would certainly say something about it. But nobody in Africa seems to want to say anything about it.
Well, I say lots about it. The trade union movement in South Africa says a lot about it. The churches in South Africa say a lot about it. The government has decided on a softly approach because they say, and I'm not a representative of the government, they say that they want to keep the lines of communication with Mugabe open. Well, we have to respect that position, although we disagree with it, but it's one of the arguments. But having said all that, the people in the north, what do they expect South Africa or any other country in the neighborhood to do? I mean, there's been lots of dictatorships in Europe where the Europeans did nothing. There were lots of dictatorships in Africa, which were encouraged by the Americans. For example, Mobutu was America's dictator.
We're bringing you the news from Africa for the next few days in the lead up to the G8 summit in Gleneagles to see how the issues of aid, trade and climate change look from an African perspective. Well now, here in Uganda tonight, AIDS. Around this pool, 1,500 students pledging total abstinence from sex, a cause finding great favour with one G8 nation, George Bush's America. Uganda's success in reducing AIDS has been founded on combining abstinence with faithfulness and condoms. Many fear that evangelicals, like the pastor running this rally, are threatening to send the condom into retreat. I've been out and about in Kampala to see just how far movements like these are confusing the life-saving AIDS message here. AIDS across Africa is still a death sentence. Even here in Uganda, only 1 in 10 AIDS sufferers has access to antiretrovirals. Here at Malago Hospital in Kampala, these AIDS patients are part of the unlucky 6% of the adult population which is infected. But as new patients wait for treatment, that 6% has been brilliantly decreased from 29% by a campaign that rested on ABC: abstinence, being faithful, and the condom. But across the valley from the hospital, the US Embassy is candid that in the last year, under congressional instruction, it has changed from funding condoms to funding abstinence. The First Lady, no less, wife of the man who did more to promote the condom in Africa than anyone, is the cheerleader for this new no-sex cause. Dr. Lydia Mungerera works at Malago Hospital. She knows a thing or two about AIDS. She's living with it. She was infected 10 years ago.
And now all of a sudden there's this condom U-turn, that's what I call it. When money from PEPFAR funding has come into this country and all of a sudden we are hearing abstinence only. It's totally unrealistic. And no regard. Is it
driven by outsiders? Is it driven by America?
Definitely it is driven by outsiders, because the money which is going to support the abstinence only campaign is coming from PEPFAR funding. And that is the President Bush campaign. And the groups of people who have got the most of this money are the faith-based organizations.
Then there's also, have you heard of pubic lice?
Sex education in Uganda is brutally frank and open.
And you know the pubic area, there's a lot of warmth and heat and everything altogether. So, when you
in the course of this class, these 12-year-olds are urged not to have sex, to abstain, then to be faithful to a partner.
Yes.
Condom use is only referred to in the event that they anyway become sexually active. Uganda has an intricate structure of adult prevention too. This extends to counselling and to HIV testing. It's a model that is being followed right across Africa. No one has ever risked an abstinence-only program until now. No one is more aware of the dangers of a U-turn on condom education than a Ugandan bar girl.
No one can say that can abstain from sex, no. People will always go on having sex.
Can I have sex with you? And he says, I'm married, I got kids, I have a wife, 3 kids, and oh, I just want to go with you for a short while, and I'm heading home.
I'm an African boy, I'm an African man. Sex is part and parcel of my life.
Well now, with me is Pastor Martin Semper, who is the pastor running this extraordinary evangelical event. Your paper tonight says 32% of Makerere students are virgins, and you want to keep it that way?
Well, we want to even do it better. We believe in behavior change. Behavior means function, reaction, or action. We can change them to protect them from HIV/AIDS, and you can see around here it's happening.
But I hate to suggest it. I mean, this also means that, 68% of the students are not virgins, so they must use condoms.
You're right. Well, it doesn't mean that you're not a virgin, you have to use a condom, because we believe in secondary virginity. Most of everybody has had sex. I had sex before I became a Christian and abstain. We think that, in fact, the greatest tool is for those who have been sexually active. They can decide on the basis of HIV/AIDS, that equipment, they can wait for sex until marriage.
But hang on, you don't think that the condom has saved lives in Uganda?
We think it reduces your chance of getting HIV/AIDS, but abstinence and being faithful are the magic bullets.
But, you know, all the investment has been in on condoms here, not on abstinence.
That's right. Unfortunately, for the last 10 years, it's been for every $10 spent on HIV/AIDS prevention, 1 has been to abstinence and 9 to condoms. That's unfair. We have to change that.
How do you know that abstinence actually works? Where has it ever worked?
It works for me, and if you ask these guys, they'll tell you it works for them.
I'm going to do just that. Where are we? Hey, George, you, there. Have you made this pledge, abstinence?
Yeah, I've paid the pledge, yeah, and I'm willing to do until I leave Campus 7.
Well, I don't want to ask you an indelicate question, but are you a virgin?
No, well, I'm not a virgin at the moment, but I'm willing to abstain more. And yeah,
the abstention is total.
Yeah, I'm not a virgin. Yeah.
Do you really think this can work, or are you worried that it'll confuse the message in? Hang on a minute. I don't think I've got this thing on, have I? Oh yeah. Do you think that this really will work? This whole business of abstinence?
Yes, of course. I think it will work because we've done this all throughout. Every year we do this, and people are changing more and more. And people are signing abstinence cards.
How do you make the pledge? Do you stand up and say publicly, I make this pledge? But you know, this country, your country, has led the world in beating AIDS. Are you not worried that the message will become confused and people will think they don't need to use condoms anymore?
To encourage people to beat the AIDS virus in a better way, in a more positive manner. That is the chances of getting chances that you'll get AIDS. So abstinence is the best way to prevent AIDS.
How many of you round here have made the pledge? How many of you made the pledge for abstinence? Oh my God. Right, well, I think on that sunny note, but controversial note, back to Alex in London from here in Kampala. We'll be back later.
Thanks, John. Now, cold, callous murderers motivated by greed. Police said there was no other explanation for the actions of Kenneth Regan and William Hornsey, convicted today for the murders of Amarjit Chauhan, his wife, her mother, and their 2 young children. A third man, Peter Rees, was also convicted of Mr. Chauhan's murder. The 3 had acted together in a plot to take over the family's freight company. Here's Lucy Manning.
1 family, 3 generations, killed by murderers the police describe as cold and callous. Amarjit Chauhan, his wife Nancy, their 2 young sons and Mrs. Chauhan's mother all disappeared in 2003. It was only the persistence of Nancy's brother that eventually convinced police to launch an investigation. What they discovered horrified even senior officers. All the family killed so convicted drugs dealer Kenneth Regan could take control of Mr. Chauhan's freight company so he could use it for drug smuggling.
It has to be, lust for money or, hatred to kill innocent people, innocent kids. I can't think of, living a peaceful, happy life without my mother, without my sister. They were so close to me.
The bodies were initially buried here in this field in Devon, and before he killed him, Regan forced Mr. Chauhan to sign letters handing over his company. The victims were then moved. This CCTV picture shows a white van police think could have been transporting all 5 bodies, and this boat was hired to dump them in the sea. Mr. Chauhan's body was found floating near Bournemouth Pier. His wife and mother-in-law's bodies were also recovered from the sea, but the children have never been found. Kenneth Regan and his accomplice William Hornsey convicted of all 5 murders. Peter Rees was found guilty of killing Mr. Chauhan. But despite the successful convictions, the initial investigation of the family's disappearance was condemned as incompetent.
It was influenced by stereotype of Mr. Chauhan as a businessman who the police initially believed may have been involved in something dodgy, inverted commas.
The police admit it was a difficult investigation. The gang, so ruthless they would kill a family to take over its business, tried hard to make it look as if the Chauhans had left the country voluntarily.
Lucy Manning reporting. Now a scapegoat for the weaknesses of an entire system. Comments made today by the editor of the medical journal, The Lancet, about the discredited paediatrician Professor Sir Roy Meadow. They coincide with the first day of Professor Meadow's defence at the General Medical Council. He's been charged with serious professional misconduct after his expert evidence was used to wrongly convict a woman of murdering her 2 children. Today, Professor Meadow said that appearing as an expert witness was an ordeal for which he'd received no formal guidelines.
Sally Clark was freed on appeal in 2003, but today Professor Sir Roy Meadow stood by his claim that 2 cot deaths in one family were, in his words, tiny. Going through in detail the research that supported his evidence at Mrs. Clark's trial, he told the General Medical Council that one paper had suggested affluent non-smoking families were 40 times less likely to suffer a cot death than disadvantaged ones. In his report to the trial, he had concluded there was a 1 in 73 million chance of her 2 babies falling victim to sudden infant death syndrome, a statistic since discredited. But in today's Lancet, its editor Richard Horton said Professor Meadow should not be found guilty of professional misconduct. He said Professor Meadow has become the scapegoat for the weaknesses of an entire system, judges, juries and expert witnesses. Professor Meadow has, he said, even in some reports been compared with serial killer GP Harold Shipman.
Child protection services are absolutely critical to the welfare of children. My worry is that symbolically bringing down one expert in child protection is going to cast doubt on all expert witnesses in child protection. It's going to make it very difficult for doctors and others to raise these issues again.
Professor Meadow also gave evidence at the trials of Angela Cannings, Trupti Patel and Donna Anthony, in which he again suggested the rarity of 2 or 3 cot deaths in one family. Although they are not part of this GMC hearing, the case continues.
The US Supreme Court's first woman judge is to retire. 75-year-old Justice Sandra Day O'Connor was appointed by Ronald Reagan back in 1981. She became known for casting decisive yet moderate votes on issues such as abortion and civil rights. Her retirement allows President Bush to make his first appointment to the 9-member High Court. A fierce political battle over her successor is now expected. Police in Turkey have shot dead a suspected suicide bomber as he apparently tried to attack a government office in the capital Ankara. The whole gruesome scene was captured on camera. The man tried to escape after being arrested and handcuffed inside. Despite warning shots, the man did not stop and the police first shot him in the leg and then, as he moved again, in the head, killing him. Explosives experts then moved in to disable the device which had been around his waist. After the violent reception given to the Glazer family earlier in the week, Joel Glazer, now a member of Manchester United's board, has used the club's own TV station to assuage fans' worries that its massive new debts could prevent future key signings.
Nobody was more excited last year when the club signed Wayne Rooney than us. But if that situation arises again, this club will be in the position to go after that player, bring him to Old Trafford, because we know players love to play here, and this club will be in a position to do that, absolutely.
To Wimbledon now, and both the men's and women's top seeds are through to the finals. Lindsay Davenport took just 5 minutes to finish off her rain-delayed match against Amelia Mauresmo, winning 6-7, 7-6, 6-4. Later, Roger Federer made it to his 3rd consecutive final, with victory today over Leighton Hewitt. Both men treated the centre court crowd to some high-quality tennis, with Hewitt in the first set matching the world #1, but Federer went on to break in the 8th game, then never looked back, clinching a 3rd set tie-break to win the match 6-3, 6-4, 7-6. In today's other semi-final, Andy Roddick of the United States was leading Sweden's Thomas Johansson by 6 games to 5 in the first set, when rain forced them off the court. Quick look at the markets now, and at the close the index of 100 leading shares was up nearly 48 points. A short time ago the pound was down against the dollar by a sharp 2 cent fall, and sterling was down against the euro by 0.07 of a cent.
When we come back, it's not only in Europe. Musicians like Geldof and Bono have more ardent followers than politicians. Here in Africa, politics and music mix all the time. Some of the continent's musical heroes tell us how their audiences expect music to carry serious messages.
Years ago, the world's biggest superpower invaded Britain. In a week of digs and events all across the country, Time Team takes on the big questions about Rome and Britain. It's our biggest project yet. Take part online and join us live. Starts this Saturday at 7:10 on 4.
Welcome back, live from Kampala, Uganda. Our main news out of Africa tonight, the rising death toll in Zimbabwe as the government there pursues its campaign of destruction against slum dwellers. 3 people are reported to have been killed in yesterday's demolitions. The United Nations says 300,000 people are now homeless. Now a look at some of the other stories making the headlines across Africa tonight. At least 2 people have been shot dead in the Democratic Republic of Congo after police clashed with protesters on the streets of Kinshasa. A further 20 people were hurt as stone-throwing youths were faced with gunfire. At least 400 people were arrested in the capital yesterday. The demonstrators were calling for the government to resign after long-awaited elections were delayed by President Joseph Kabila. The vote was organized as part of a 2003 peace deal to end a 5-year war. Supporters of ousted South African Deputy President Jacob Zuma said today they plan to make his corruption trial into a political protest against Thabo Mbeki. Mr. Zuma appeared in court for the first time on Wednesday in one of the biggest political scandals South Africa has ever known. He is charged with 2 counts of corruption. President Mbeki decided to sack him when the allegations arose. But Zuma still has substantial support within the ANC, especially in the youth movement and in the South African Communist Party. Finally, a recently opened training centre again in Kinshasa is hoping to further the dreams of Africa's female footballers. Cyril Zuma is captain of the Congo's top women's team. Currently there is no national league and it's still highly unusual for women to play the sport. But she believes the new Kurara football centre may just dissuade her from leaving and trying to fulfill her dreams of becoming a professional in Europe.
If the right conditions were in place here, I would try and stay in the country. If I could be paid the same as in Europe, I would stay here.
And the weather in Uganda, fine night, bit of cloud. Let's take a look at the weather picture across Africa. It will be very dry and sunny across most of the continent. 2 degrees warmer than the same time last year. But there's a band of heavy and thundery rain from Cameroon across Sudan and all the way to Ethiopia. The hottest temperatures in Khartoum and Cairo. Looking towards the east, plenty of sunshine inland, but heavy thundery downpours on the coast. It's usually very wet in Ethiopia at this time of year, but early warning satellites used to predict famine. They found that the rainy season is starting slightly later each year. Described now as the biggest music event in history, preparations are well underway in all of the G8 countries for tomorrow night's series of Live 8 concerts. In London's Hyde Park, artists such as Madonna, U2, Paul McCartney will be playing to a television audience that organisers say could reach more than 5 billion people. That's 85% of the world's population. At the main Live 8 concert in London, only 2 of the acts will be from Africa, with a separate event for African musicians added only as an afterthought. Organisers have been criticised for patronising African artists, but they may also have missed the opportunity to involve some of the most politically engaged and influential people from this continent. Our arts correspondent Nicholas Glass talked to some of them as they passed through London.
The great Baba Mal from Senegal, now an unbelievably youthful 52 and an African hero.
I think music is the most important way of communicating in Africa, because you know everyone is connected to the music, African music.
Musicians in Africa are revered, perhaps more so than any other place on earth. They fill a void with so few political leaders to look up to. They're expected to have something to say. Baba Mal has toured villages in Senegal and Mauritania to sing and to talk about HIV and AIDS.
If you send someone from outside to come to talk to them about HIV/AIDS, maybe they're not going to listen. But if it's someone that they respect, that they see for years, have been always there with them, even you are very big and famous, but you always back, you always keep the tradition, you always show them that our tradition is important. From the old man to the young boy, when you come to talk to them, they're going to listen.
African musicians, often middle-aged before the West takes serious notice of them, regularly tour over here. Tianu Nkobo, a Zulu musician from South Africa, also writes songs about HIV and AIDS and government corruption. Rashid Taha, a French Algerian who recently played the Royal Festival Hall, is very much punk in spirit. He can't perform in the North African Arab countries he'd like to, though his music is circulated there. His songs question certain Muslim values, including the tradition of arranged marriages. Idrissa Suma Oro from Mali has spent most of his working life teaching music to blind children. This song, Ntaki, is about everyone being vulnerable. Idrissa has toured Mali, warning of the dangers of going blind from drinking insect-infested river water.
People have to live cleanly, because if you are dirty, even not blindness alone, you can't get any illness when you are not clean.
So you've been singing about
Yes,
that?
singing all around the country with Amadou and Mariam singing at that time. And to
Do you think you had an effect?
Yes, yes, indeed. Because I think the number is getting less and less.
The shrine in Lagos, part club, part social centre, belonging to the great Nigerian king of Afrobeat, Femi Kuti, son of the legendary Fela Kuti. Femi believes Live Aid is a good thing, though he doesn't think Live Aid 20 years ago made much difference.
20 years ago, the same thing was done for Ethiopia, and there's still a war in Ethiopia. I have not seen Ethiopia. It has grown from worse to worse in Ethiopia ever since the Live Aid. Africa, we are the world, all those things for Africa. We were young then, 20 years younger, and now I'm in my 40s, and I've not seen Africa in any respect benefit from any of the aids that come there.
My only worry is see more and more African musicians to be part of it, because they are the tongue, they are the talking drum that can be heard in Africa, in every area in Africa.
Nicholas Glass reporting, but it's not just the music of this weekend that is attracting attention. The city of Edinburgh is making preparations for thousands of protesters arriving to march through that city. A campsite's already been set up in the centre of Edinburgh ahead of a demonstration tomorrow organised by the Make Poverty History campaign. 250,000 people are expected to join in, and from a human white band around the city centre. Our correspondent Sarah Smith is in Edinburgh. Sarah, I guess the city authorities there would rather see what's happening here, which is, I'm afraid, just 6 protesters on a roundabout with Make Poverty History. But are the city authorities getting nervous?
There is a bit of trepidation, and preparations obviously are in place. Shops have been boarded up, roads have been closed, there are barricades outside important buildings like the Scottish Parliament. But as people have started flooding into the city tonight, you can really see them arriving now, flooding off trains, coming in by bus, hundreds of thousands of people, 250,000 expected altogether. Edinburgh is also trying to be quite welcoming to them. They don't want people to arrive into a hostile atmosphere as though they aren't welcome, because the thing is, the authorities, although they're nervous, they do actually want to see this protest go off peacefully and successfully. Even a senior policeman told me today all of his officers actually agree with the aims of the demonstrators, and so they do want to see it work well, and they don't want people to feel as though they're unwelcome in the city. The real controversy centres around the protests at Glen Eagles, the hotel where the world leaders themselves will arrive on Wednesday. There were protests even inside the Scottish Parliament about that yesterday. It's now been agreed 5,000 protesters can walk within 500 metres of this 5-star hotel. People hope that might take some of the heat out of the other protests here here in Edinburgh, in nearby Auchterarder, and let's hope it will all go off peacefully. No petrol is being sold in cans around Edinburgh tonight. That's how nervous people are that something might go wrong.
Thanks, Sarah Smith in Edinburgh. Our main headline tonight: at least 3 people have died in Zimbabwe in the latest wave of demolitions of shanty towns. The United Nations says 300,000 people are now homeless as a result of the government's program to sweep away slum dwellings. And here, this evangelical abstinence rally is at full pelt. Candlelit, and the pool generally used for baptisms, but no total immersions tonight. That's all for tonight. For the next few days, we'll be bringing you more news from Africa. What people here make of the Live Aid concerts, that's at 6:40. Till then, from Alex in London, me in Kampala, that's Channel 4 News. Good evening.
Channel 4 Weather is sponsored by Expedia.co.uk. Create your perfect trip.
The sequence today shows pressure falling in the northwest as a low develops through Saturday. So with these tightly packed isobars, we can expect strong winds too. Most places will turn cloudy with light rain or drizzle tonight, but Scotland will remain dry with clear spells. Mild for most, but lows of 7 Celsius, 45 Fahrenheit in the north. Cloud and rain will move northwards tomorrow, but drier and brighter weather will follow for most places later on. It'll be windy in places with highs of 26 Celsius, that's 79 Fahrenheit. Looking ahead to Sunday, we'll see cloud and rain for much of the day in the southeast, whilst elsewhere it'll be brighter with a few showers and rather windy with it. By Monday, many places should see some decent sunny spells, but some showers too, mainly in the east.
Expedia.co.uk. Create your perfect trip.